Spring comes to the lake to paint. Hills hustle and water unfolds. Try to leave Hangzhou, but I cannot. Mostly because of the lake. Here, the lake is the most well-known cultural landscape in China, the West Lake. The West Lake is located to the west of Hangzhou City, Zhejiang Province. Its water area is 5.6 square kilometers. It is surrounded by hills on 3 sides. To the east side is Hangzhou City. Su Causeway and Bai Causeway divided the lake into 5 areas which are connected to each other through bridges. The 2 causeways, Lesser Yinzhou Isle, Mid-Lake Pavilion Isle, and Lord Rangongdun Isle, as a whole, formed the 2 causeways and 3 isles layout. It took a long time for the West Lake cultural landscape to take shape. In remote ancient times, the West Lake was a shallow bay. After a series of geographic movements, it turned into a lagoon. Since then, a successive process of swamping and deswamping has started. People who live by the side of the lake have always been taking good care of it, generation after generation, in case that the lake may turn into a swamp or even disappear. In this long term, Hangzhou people contributed a lot in creating the unique and profound cultural landscape which is in great harmony with the whole natural settings. Bai Zhiyi, the great poet in Tang Dynasty, built a long causeway using the lake bottom silt. This kind of practice of involving landscape designing in irrigation works had profound influence in the later generations. It is an outstanding expression of harmonious interaction between human and nature. In Northern Song Dynasty, Su Dongpo, another great man of letters, took charge of dredging work in the West Lake. He also used the lake bottom silt to build a causeway, which later was named after him as Su Causeway. There are 6 bridges on Su Causeway and flanked by willows and peach trees. Su Dongpo put 3 stone pagodas in the lake to mark the depth of water. The causeway and pagodas are not only for conservancy project, but also developed into elements of the whole landscape. Hangzhou was the capital of Southern Song Dynasty. The West City Wall and the Wall Gate were next to the West Lake. Since then, the pattern of hills on 3 sides and city on 1 side of the West Lake started to take shape. The poetry and painting art was well developed at that time. The West Lake landscape in 4 different seasons became the major object in royal painters' paintings. And the painters always named their paintings poetically with 4 Chinese characters. By this means, scenery showed in the paintings were approved and appreciated by the later generations, and finally leads to the emergence of 10 views of the West Lake. In Ming Dynasty, the Mid-Lake Pavilion and Lesser Yinzhou Isle were constructed. Later in the middle of Qing Dynasty, Lord Rangongdun Isle was built. Hence, the layout of 2 causeways and 3 isles was complete. In early Qing Dynasty, Emperor Kangxi and Qianlong traveled to Hangzhou. The 10 scenic spots were approved by the emperor himself. Pavilions and steles were built on spot with the best view on each side. The ruins of temporary palace of Kangxi and Qianlong when they traveled here was still there in the Gushan Hill. The 10 views of the West Lake are the essence of the West Lake landscape. They embodied the harmonious coherence between poems, paintings, and sceneries. They are also an outstanding express of the Chinese traditional philosophical idea of harmony between human and nature in landscape designing. What's more, they represent the Oriental aesthetic value of picturesque beauty and a nature-painted picture. Spring Dawn at Su Causeway. It is the top one of the 10 views of the West Lake in the Southern Song Dynasty. With green willows and red booming peach flowers, the causeway shows the best spring scene. Strolling on it, you may enjoy the undulating six bridges and picturesque beauty. Breeze-ruffled lotus at Winding Garden. In summertime, with green leaves and red flowers, as well as lotus fragrance, it's quite refreshing because the flower is so pure. In Chinese traditional culture, lotus represents high virtue. Autumn moon over the calm lake. On an autumn night, the moon, rippling waves and the breeze may create the illusion of the legendary Moon Palace. Melting snow on Broken Bridge. When it turned sunny after snow, from Baoshi Hill, Bai Causeway looks like a silver chain. In the sun, the snow on Broken Bridge melting and revealing the brown ground, creating the illusion that the chain is broken. Viewing fish at Flower Pond. In spring, carps playing with peach petals falling into the pool may create an interesting scene. Orioles singing in the willows. Willows swinging in the breeze. It looks like green waves in the air. With orioles singing, the whole picture gives people a sense of natural vitality. Three pools mirroring the moon. When candles are lit in the three pagodas in the moonlight, the moon in the sky, its reflection in the water, the moon-shaped light in the pagodas, along with the moon in people's heart, may inspire longing for beloved ones. Two peaks piercing the cloud. When it is misty, the top of two mountains emerge and disappear from time to time, as though in a heavenly Buddhist world. Leifeng Pagoda in evening glow. When sunset, the rosy clouds radiate in the sky, revealing a magnificent vision of Leifeng Pagoda in the dusk. Evening bell at Nanping Hill. The bell in the Jingzi Temple at Nanping Hill strikes every evening, the toll lingering durably above the waters, in the hills and among the woods, sending a reclusive feeling and serenity of Zen. Early in the 4th century, there was Linyin Temple, Tianzhu Temple, and so on. During the Wuyue Kingdom, the emperor in Hangzhou worships Buddhism. Hundreds of Buddhist temples and grotto carvings, which well matched the surrounding natural settings, were erected around the West Lake. Hence, Hangzhou was known as the Southeast Kingdom of Buddhism. In Southern Song Dynasty, Linyin Temple and the Jingzi Temple were listed in the 5 mountains and 10 temples, which was the top organizational system of Zen. Today, on Feilai Peak, there are more than 300 pieces of Buddhist sculpture which can be dated back to Yuan Dynasty. The sculptures of Tibetan Buddhism are the most outstanding. The Feilai Peak group grotto carving is the only one includes both Han and Tibetan Buddhism sculptures in China. It plays an important role in the history of Chinese fine art and Tibetan art of Buddhism. Taoism is the most influential local religion in China. In Hangzhou, it has a history of 2,000 years. In the 4th century, the famous Taoist Ge Hong came to Hangzhou. From then on, Taoism started to develop fast in Hangzhou. Some relics of Taoism can still be found around Baopu Monastery by the side of West Lake. There are some other places where you can find traces of Taoism, such as Yuhuang Mountain, Wushan Mountain, and so on. All these are testimony of profound Taoism culture around the West Lake. In the mountains around the West Lake, there are large areas of green tea plantation. This is West Lake Longjing tea, which has the reputation of Queen of Green Tea. Gradually, the typical Oriental tea Zen culture has taken shape in the long history of growing and drinking tea. In Song Dynasty, scholars liked savoring tea while talking Zen with monks in order to cultivate their minds and spirits. The story of great poet Su Dongpo drinking tea and talking Zen with Master Bian Cai became a much-told tale. We can still find relics of Longjing Spring and Guoxi Pavilion, where they two used to hanging around. These relics are also the evidence of the early development of tea Zen culture in China. Hermit culture is a philosophy of life of traditional Chinese scholars. They stay far away from common customs and retreat themselves in order to pursue a pure and sublime morality. By appreciating the natural beauty of mountains and waters, they refine themselves. The tranquil and peaceful environment of the West Lake was just perfect for the hermit. Lin Bu, a hermit in northern Song Dynasty, is the best representative of hermit culture. Today, in Gushan Hill, there are steles in memory of him and his tomb. Yue Fei's story is known to all around Hangzhou city as well as the whole country. He is the most famous hero in China. In the war between southern Song and Jin, he was very brave. He is a model of the spirit of loyalty and filial piety. He is adored by all generations. Together with Yu Qian and Zhang Cangshui, they three are called three heroes of the West Lake. They are all buried along the lakeside. The West Lake is a gathering place for scholars. This creates the atmosphere of book collecting culture. The establishment of Wenlan Pavilion was the mark of the most prosperous time of book collecting culture. Wenlan Pavilion's function is to store the complete library in 4 branches of literature. It is the only one still perfectly kept both the book and the pavilion itself. It is a treasure of Chinese book collecting culture. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Chinese society experienced very big changes. During this period, the beautiful sceneries and the profound culture of the West Lake attracts a lot of elites, as it always does. Their footmarks can be traced along the lake. Shilin Seal Society was founded at the beginning of the 20th century. It is a non-governmental society majoring in studying seals, calligraphy, and paintings. Its fame spreads wide at home and abroad. It also enjoyed the reputation of #1 society in China. It is an outstanding example of the historical relics of modern times culture and art of the West Lake. In 1,000 years history, the West Lake cultural landscape has inspired a total of 18 million words, more than 400 literary works, and over 2,000 paintings. It carried admire, enjoyment, and the love of various people from different social classes for centuries. It has been a real spiritual home for traditional Chinese literati ever since the 10th century. The White Snake and Liangshan Bull and Zhu Yingtai of the 4 major folk legends in ancient China are set in the West Lake. It created a romantic atmosphere in the West Lake. The West Lake cultural landscape and related culture and history was well handed down by generation after generation. Every year, more than 20 million tourists come to visit the lake, and Hangzhou is awarded with the title of Most Livable City and Oriental Capital of Leisure. The West Lake is a living cultural heritage, and it will be the wonderland on earth, in people's heart, forever and ever.